Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Yacht Crew Vlogs right here on Yachting International Radio. My name is Ria. I am your host, and today I am welcoming back Lee Harris, the Director of Operations at Blue Marine Travel in New Zealand. How are you, Lee?
I'm very well, thanks, Ria. Thanks for having me back once again.
Well, you know what? I mean, in today's day and age, I think it's really important to let people know there's so many things that are happening so quickly, so many changes. Crew are wanting to go from one part of the world to the other, and no one really knows what's going on, and the questions abound. So it's really nice to be able to tap into someone like you that has the finger on the pulse of travel and is able to sort of inform us what is happening, especially with crew situations.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I mean, I'll do my best to answer any questions. And like I say, it's a ever-changing situation at the moment with travel restrictions and border closures. We are seeing shoots of recovery again, but it is a long process. It's going to take some time to get back to how we were pre-COVID-19, but it's looking a lot more positive than what it did.
Well, tell me, we were talking off air. There is some good news out of the Philippines.
Yeah, so this past couple of weeks, one of the most asked questions that we've had from our accounts and from individual crew members as well looking to book is whether the Philippines is allowing international flights to arrive and depart. The good news is, yes, they are operating at the moment. However, I will temper it slightly with the fact that Manila Airport are only allowing 600 passengers to arrive a day. And obviously with so many desperate to get home after being on board their respective yachts well past their contractual date, flights are increasingly difficult to get seats on. We have this past week managed to get more crew home. So what I would say is, if anyone is struggling to get flights back to Manila, please reach out to us, because we are more than happy to try and help and navigate your way home. But what I would also say as well, with arrivals back into Manila, people need to be aware that they will still have to do mandatory quarantine on arrival whilst they await their PCR test results. So they won't be able to take domestic flights once they arrive into Manila. They will have to stay there for a little while.
Now, are they actually doing tests in the airport then as arrivals come into the country?
Yes. So from what we understand at the moment, anybody who is showing symptoms when they get off the flight will be tested. And once their test results come back, depending on what the result is, either they'll have to stay in the managed quarantine in Manila, or they will be allowed to either self-isolate at home or go to a quarantine facility closer to where they live.
Well, what's going on in Dubai? There's been some movement in Dubai as well.
Yes, so Dubai this week have announced that they'll be allowing international travellers back into the country from the 7th of July. Again, all arrivals will be subject to thermal screening, which basically is pretty much normal now at any airport going forward. But if a traveller is suspected to have COVID-19 symptoms, Dubai Airport have the right to retest to ensure that the tourist, or obviously the crew member, is free of the virus. It is mandatory for all people who travel into Dubai who test positive for COVID-19 to register their details on the COVID-19 Dubai Airport app, and they have to also isolate themselves at an institutional facility provided by the government for 14 days, but this is going to be at their own expense. It won't be paid for by the government. Anybody who is not, who does not test positive doesn't have to go into managed quarantine.
So is there a lot of countries that have special quarantine centers?
Yeah, there's a few. New Zealand, for one, where we are, they've just had to extend. They've got, or they had 8 hotels in Auckland that they put people into, but with the amount of people coming back home who have been sort of stranded abroad, they've now had to move out to other areas because there just wasn't the room anymore in Auckland. Again, like we were talking about, the Philippines, they have managed quarantine. There are a few other places across the world also, again, have managed quarantine. So yeah, a lot of countries have gone that route. That's definitely for sure.
Now, the question on a lot of people's lips right now is, because it is traditionally the med season, what is going on with Mediterranean travel? I mean, as far as, yes, we have the yacht charter market open, but if there's nobody here, if they can't get into charter a yacht, then that's no good to anybody either. And as well, crew coming from around the world wanting to get, a job on a yacht.
Yeah, so there, we've had again some movement with more flights being put on for the Med, which is good news. I think last time I was on, I mentioned that KLM, Lufthansa, and Brussels Airlines had increased their flight load to the Med. This past couple of weeks, also, we've heard that Emirates and Etihad Airlines have also put on extra flights into Europe. Etihad have now got flights going into Amsterdam, Barcelona, Brussels, Frankfurt, Geneva, London, Madrid, Milan, Paris, and Zurich. So again, that will help to get people to where they need to be in the Med. Again, with Emirates, they've also increased their flights into Europe. I haven't got the specifics on me at the moment, but I know they're now flying into Madrid as well, Zurich, Vienna, Amsterdam. So we can get people into Europe, and then we can transit them across as well. So it's looking a lot more positive, and I think it's definitely looking a lot better than what it was.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I just noticed on social media actually today was that the European Union is currently putting together no-fly lists and fly lists as far as countries that will be allowed into Europe and those countries that definitely won't. Can you
Yes.
enlighten us on that?
To be honest, they're keeping it close to their chests at the moment. It's questions we've been asked. Obviously, from the 1st of July, EU countries, Schengen member states, passengers can travel into if they've got a passport from there. From the 1st of August, they've said they're going to open up their borders to more countries. This is where it gets a little bit grey, a little bit murky. We're not quite sure exactly who they mean when they say to more. There's lots of things saying whether there's a reciprocal agreement with the country to allow tourists to and from the countries. So until they come out with a definitive list, it's almost impossible to say who exactly they're going to be letting in from the 1st of August. They've basically just said we're going to let people in, but at this moment in time, we can't say who it's going to be.
Well, interestingly enough, I did see a possible list, and it stated that the U.S. wasn't going to be allowed into the borders of the EU, but England was. And as far as their management of the virus, they're pretty much on par with each other. So I'm not really understanding why one would be and the other wouldn't.
It just makes no sense, does it? I mean, it's just bonkers. I would imagine probably because the UK, they would probably send a lot more British tourists over there. So to try and kickstart the season, that would be my guess why they're letting those people in, other than say the US. But that's the only reason I can think of, that it's purely to try and kickstart that summer season for them.
Well, in your opinion, when do you think that things will go back to normal? I mean, I realize that we are talking a new normal, but how long do you think it's going to take travel the world over to get back to the way it used to be?
It's going to be a while for definite. It's quite interesting because I've sort of seen people saying, prices are going to rocket and it's going to take 2, 3, 4 years for it to get back to normal. If I'm honest, I honestly don't believe it'll take that long. I don't think prices will rocket, purely for the fact that they're going to need people traveling. So if you start pricing people out of it, you're never going to get that recovery coming along. So if I was a betting man, I'd probably say we'll start to see by the end of this year, we should see a more normal approach world over, provided a second wave obviously doesn't hit. Especially with New Zealand, I mean, they're still not letting any international tourists in whatsoever. So again, I would hope that we'd be looking at maybe January that we start to see the easing world over for people to start moving around freely.
So with this new normal, do you think it's going to significantly increase time spent in airports because we're going to be having more testing, we're going to be having a more screening? Is this something we're going to be looking forward from now forever?
I think for a while, for definite, yeah, I would. Most places are now getting thermal screening in place, stuff like that. So it's for definite, it's going to take longer to get through queues at the airport from check-in. I mean, at the moment, it probably isn't going to be quite so bad because you've not got so many people traveling, especially for the crew, if they're going to the vessel or coming back from the vessel. They shouldn't see too much of an increase, I wouldn't have thought. But once the borders are open and everybody's traveling, until they find a vaccine, then there's definitely going to be times added. to check in, to board, and yeah, it's going to be a long time, I think.
Well, I can imagine. I mean, we had gotten it down to a stage where you could do your online check-in. You had a place where you could just drop your bags and just head straight through security. So rocking up an hour before your flight was to take off was actually feasible. What kind of time frame would you suggest people make in advance of their flight to make sure that they get on that flight when they are able to book it?
Well, again, it's quite interesting because I use New Zealand as an example because I'm here, so I get to hear more about people's experiences at the airports here. But I had one of our clients the other week who got to Auckland airport plenty of time. She was there way before check-in time. I think the check-in was supposedly opens for 2 hours beforehand. That's what they recommend. She was there 3 hours beforehand, and it was touch and go whether she was going to get on the flight. And the reason was they were phoning through because this flight was from Auckland to Australia and then to Europe. They were phoning New South Wales because they're flying into Sydney. So they were phoning New South Wales border control to make sure every single passenger could enter into Australia. And the ones who couldn't were filtered out and were told that, you've been denied boarding, so you can't. They were then having to phone these were flying to Sydney, then from Sydney to Doha. So then they were phoning to Doha. Then they were phoning to their end destination as well. So they were making 3 phone calls just for this one passenger to make sure that they could go to each point they were going on their travels. And she said it was touch and go that they managed to go on the flight in time. So, and that was 3 hours before. So I would recommend that people certainly give themselves plenty of time at the airport. 3 hours, I would say, minimum at least.
It's good to hear, though, because rather than send somebody or even allow somebody to get on their first flight with an ongoing journey, I've heard stories where people have gotten on their first flight and gotten to their ultimate destination after 1 or 2 flights and then been refused entry and had to be sent back for the simple fact that where their destination routed them through did not allow them into their final destination. So the fact that New Zealand is actually taking that time to make those phone calls to make sure that no matter how many flights you have to take to get to your final destination, that it will be allowed and you will be allowed entry into that country. So that is kind of a positive when you think about it.
It is, yeah. I mean, it does take more time, but like you say, it is a positive. You're not going to get stuck on your journey, and you're going to be safe and well on that journey. You're going to get to where you need to be. But again, I would reach out to anybody, any crew member who is traveling at the moment, and if they're thinking about booking for themselves, it doesn't have to be through Blue Marine, but any marine travel agent to contact them, because, like I said, there are so many rules and regulations still in place. I know a lot are easing off, but there are still a lot, and I would hate for anybody to pay out their hard-earned money on flights which they've booked online to only get to an airport and then be told that they're denied boarding. Because what we're finding as well, again, is airlines are holding on to refunds. They're taking a long time. We've been told ourselves not to expect refunds from certain airlines for at least 6 months, possibly even longer than that. So yeah, I mean, if you want to book online, feel free to, but I would strongly recommend going through a marine travel agency, because they will be able to give you the advice of where you'd be able to travel to and through and transit, and any paperwork that you'll possibly need whilst doing it.
Well, and I mean, realistically, what is the difference in price from booking online and booking through a proper travel agency?
So, well, I mean, again, to be honest, I mean, with marine fares that we and other marine agents can offer, there's not a great deal of difference. If anything, we can be cheaper, than what you'd find online. Even if people just wanted to reach out to us and get an idea of what the price would be, that's fine. And then if they find it cheaper online, if that's what they wanted to do, again, that's fine. But we would always say, just please contact us. Don't hand over your hard-earned money without researching first, because like we say, we are finding that refunds are taking increasingly long time to come back. And the state of, obviously, the airlines at the moment, if they're saying that they're going to hold on to your money for at least 6 months, there's no guarantee that some of these airlines are going to still be in operation in 6 months' time. So we would hate for you to lose all your money on flights that you've not been able to take.
Well, and realistically, at the end of the day, when you book online and something goes wrong, who do you call? Whereas if you actually book with an agency and you find yourself stuck somewhere you've got somebody at the end of the line that you can call that can help you sort that situation out. I think in today's day and age, the smartest bet to be, especially if you are traveling to meet up with crew on your new job, it would be best bet to make sure you've got that backing.
Almost definitely. I mean, obviously, certain airlines you can only book online. You know, you've got the internet airlines, the cheap airlines that we can book for people as well. And what we're finding out is if, because of the COVID crisis, if the flight's been cancelled, if you try and get hold of that airline, it's nigh on impossible. Honestly, you could be sitting on a phone call for 2 hours. So if you've got to the airport or whatever and your flight's been cancelled, don't think they're going to be rebooking you on that next flight, because you're highly unlikely to even get through to them before that next flight departs. It does take an extremely long time. And it's not their. I'm not blaming them for that, because obviously they are inundated with phone calls from worried passengers. But at least if you've got an agent that you can go through, they may have contacts that they could speak to at that airline to make it a quicker process for you, or they can just change the ticket you've got. You don't need to speak directly to the airline. You can just give us a call. We can change your ticket over. You can be on your way, before you know it.
Well, Lee, I thank you for your time. It sounds like there's a lot of good news coming in through the travel industry in regards to crew moving from one end of the earth to the other. The Filipinos, they are looking at, definitely some light at the end of the tunnel as well, Dubai,
Yes.
and Europe too. So, it looks like maybe this year, even though it's a bit late, is going to kick off and hopefully produce the results that we were expecting in the beginning of the year.
Yeah, I think so. I definitely think, there's definitely going to be a mid-season, which is good news, because it definitely didn't look like it for a while, that's for sure, because sort of March, April time, it did look like it was going to be dead in the water. But yeah, no, like I said before, there's definitely shoots of recovery.
Excellent. Well, Lee, I hope that you will come back on board in a week's time and give us any more updates that may be coming down your way, because as you said, things are moving very quickly, things are changing very fast, and it's always good to let people know exactly in this crazy world of so much information, we can never actually find the information that we want particularly. So it's good to have you on board.
I know, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Once again, you've been watching another edition of Yacht Crew Vlogs right here on Yachting International Radio. We will provide Lee's information at the bottom of this interview if you are in need of traveling to or from your yacht. My name is Ria. I have been your host. Please tune in again for another episode.